Hello out there, Internet. It's Tim and Dan again, the Nerd Champs, here to ruin another week for you.
Bring it on, haters. Bring it on. All right.
Yeah, we're here to stomp on your Tolkien dreams and bring you pain and misery so that you can yell at us and call us fake nerds and shills and whatever else it is.
I'm still waiting on my paycheck from Amazon, Dan. I don't know about you, but I haven't received mine yet. So
I know. I can't even get a free Prime subscription. I haven't got any early access deals. Yeah, I can't even get a pack of Amazon Basics batteries out of this, but
they won't
whatever.
Even give me a t-shirt, man. They won't even give us a t-shirt. Okay. Yep, it's t-shirt. Crazy. Us and all of our 75 subscribers, I'm sure that they are very concerned about paying us. So
yeah,
it's kind of funny that the response that we get. Okay. And the reason that we bring it up is because Dan and I have voiced several concerns about things that we do think are shortcomings on the show. But that's not enough for these people. It's because we didn't dig a hole in the dirt in the backyard and sit in it and tear our clothes and weep uncontrollably that this show exists. That's not enough, And so it's just funny that these people feel the need to hit our comments and call us morons. But hey, we are here for it. We will take all of the hate because guess what, guys? We still like this show. Okay.
Yeah.
So we still like it. So continue in the comments. We love it. Okay. We live for this stuff. So anyway, go ahead, Dan.
Two nerds that used to only talk to each other about this stuff, and we don't always agree. So we like arguing about this stuff. So come on, let's argue. Like I just find it hilarious, Tim, that at the same time, the same people are telling us that oh my God, it is the worst thing ever, and I just have to run a warm bath and an orc baby now. I've seen a female orc. I've seen an orc baby. So now I'm gonna have to cry crocodile tears every time I see Legolas and Aragorn just wipe out swaths of orcs. I'm gonna be so sad and broken up about it. They're mad about that, but we are the woke ones. We're the overly sensitive. We're the shills. I mean, like, come on, Snowflake. Do you cry for the orphans every time you watch the Death Star explode? Because I don't. They're Empire orphans. Let's have some more.
I don't know what happened.
Hold on.
They are so mad at me. They got me kicked off this feed for like 30 seconds. I don't know what happened.
They've attacked our cable and phone companies. They are chopping down wires. They are climbing telephone lines to make sure. Good.
So yeah. Anyway, man. I don't know. We said too many good things about Amazon. That's what it was. But anyway,
we are under siege. We are under siege.
That's right. That's right. Currently,
we cannot.
This persecution.
We cannot come to the masses and tell them that this show is okay.
That's right. These are the persecutions of the otherwise opinionated on Rings of Power right here.
Yeah.
So okay, Dan. So what you wanna go ahead and kick us off with your review of what you thought of this episode?
Okay, so episode 5. Personally, for me, we spent a lot of time in Númenor, and to be honest, I know that one of your least favorite and least interested, even though we are the ones who love every single second of it. Your least favorite is the stranger. We'll call him Gandalf for lack of a better name, and the halflings. That might be your least favorite part. One of my least favorite parts is Númenor. For some reason, for whatever, that just like the characters there are not grabbing me that much, and the fact that we spend most of the episode there was kind of a detriment to me because I don't know, it's just not as compelling to me. It was okay. The making of the rings is still more interesting to me. That was the part of the episode that was more gravitating. I'm not 100% sure that I loved that one of the rings made somebody turn invisible. Again, I am not as well versed as all of you amazing people who tell me how dumb I am. So I'm not sure if the One Ring is the only ring that makes you turn invisible. Obviously, within the structure of this show, it's not. And that's fine. It's okay. I don't know if I'm 100% great with it. Maybe that is canon, and that's fine too. One thing is the elf. They were saying when you're in the unseen world and you're invisible, you see the spiritual world. But my understanding was the elves always see the spiritual world. They see the unseen world all the time. So I don't know if that would be all that different, because I think I had seen that again, we're not as deep in it, but I thought the elves could see people's auras and that kind of thing all of the time. So I don't know. That might be this week's huge controversy and why we're called buffoons. And I do have to admit, the end of the episode,
I knew it would.
Had me feeling like I might have to eat crow. Because when he took out,
well, you specifically said it's the one thing you specifically said you would join the haters on. So
yes,
but we're not quite there yet, right? So the idea has been presented, but it has not been accepted, and so we're not quite there yet. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah.
Now the one thing is, like, I was talking to my wife. She watched it with me when the show ended, and I didn't even realize I got excited because you don't get this anymore. After you let it play for a minute, if you're all caught up, it gives you the next week on Rings of Power, which, like, as a 45-year-old man, next week on this show is just like it sent like nostalgia tingles down my whole spine, because you don't get next week on anymore. Yeah. But all of my favorite shows used to say next week on Magnum PI, and then you get and then like Magnum fights, so dude, I love it, right? But in the next week on, it appears like Galadriel is not going to be receptive to that overture. So now that doesn't mean that they didn't just do some tricky editing and I'm being fooled, but I have high hopes that she's not going to be receptive, and then I won't have to eat crow, because that'll be a lot of crow and it won't taste good.
Well, and I think, this is the one that I also will join the haters if that is the case. Okay. Because that is once again, that is destroying a character's entire backstory, from the ground level. Okay. It's not just showing what has led to this point, or it's not just showing, a little bit of a different take on the character and how they end up getting where we see them later on. That's completely tearing the character down. And so I would not be for that either. Okay. But my feelings on the episode were this. I actually, I did not mind the inner working, political storyline that they had going for a while. I thought that was actually relatively interesting. In fact, it gave this show something that I think that it needed, which was its King Joffrey moment. Keeman just kind of kept being the guy that was just pushing the buttons, the really punchable face, and you just want someone to come in here and sock him, and they finally do. And so we kind of had that moment in the series, which was much needed. I think you got to have somebody like this, man. You got to have that guy in a series like this. It's just that kind of a character lends itself to this kind of storyline. So I like that a lot. The other storylines that we kind of had, I once again was not a huge fan of what they did with Galadriel at the end. That was not something that I would have chosen to do. But we don't really know exactly where it's headed yet. So we'll see. And then the Forging of the Rings does feel kind of more like a necessary plot that they have to do. So I'm still kind of waiting on some things to develop there, but the tension there between Celebrimbor and Anatar is very obvious, and so I'm trying to kind of figure out exactly when that's going to boil over. But that is something that is worth mentioning. I think that it's going to be a necessary storyline moving forward. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm still enjoying it. I feel like it's not a perfect series. I think that you and I have both addressed this. I think that there are things about This episode in particular that just seemed a little bit slower, but not anything that's going to ruin the series for me. Every series kind of has these filler episodes or these things that are kind of meant to set up, and that's kind of what this one feels like. I mean, we're talking about a contract that they've got to do 50 hours of this. I mean, so they've got to fill some space. You got to nail down the details the way that Tolkien actually would have. So I'm not really upset about the fact that it's a little bit slower, but this episode was a little bit on the slower end. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. I mean, I like the, as far as Númenor, I feel like with Keenan and when you get the Aarian, you've got like a twofer of punchable characters. You've got like a real Karen
yeah.
with Elendil's daughter, even, just she's worse, I think. she's just so awful. And to have somebody you can really hate is always fun. Mm-hmm. We got a lot of dwarves this episode. How are you feeling with the dwarf section? I worked for me.
I kind of feel like the tension between Durin the Younger and Durin the Older is starting to heat up. Durin the Older is getting a little bit more corrupted by the possibilities of the ring, and Durin the Younger is not, which I think is great. I think the one thing that felt unnecessary is the instruction of his wife to never wear one of the rings when that was really already his decision. You could tell. So I kind of felt like that was an unnecessary thing. It's almost like they were trying to push the idea that, it's all because of his wife that he's not going to wear it. But when he had already made that decision. He knows what these rings are, and he knows that his father is being corrupted by it. So I'm not, it felt completely unnecessary to me, but I do think that the storyline itself and how the ring itself started corrupting Durin the Older was one that I really enjoyed, how they were in the mine and it was showing him where to dig and all that kind of stuff. And so all of a sudden the ring becomes the thing that he trusts, when ultimately the ring is what made the mine vulnerable, if you look at it that way. So that's kind of something that is definitely going to lead to some trouble later on for sure.
Yeah. I felt like the dwarves were really good this episode. One thing from the last episode that was like, it was made fairly clear, and I didn't pick up, and I don't think we did last one, was that Elrod was not going to continue on to warn Celebrimbor, because now he had to turn around and warn the king that the orcs are on the march to attack the Elven city. So instead of heading back to Celebrimbor, he went back to Lindon to warn the king, because they're about to attack. That's a part of the pacing problems that we're getting, because when things like this happens, it becomes a little bit more frustrating. The only reason Sauron is succeeding at all is because Galadriel just ran off and said, "Do not treat with him. Don't talk to that guy," and left. She could have just said, "Hey, I just got suckered. That was Sauron."
Yeah.
And then no rings are made.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And now, Elrod's on his way to warn him, but he figures out this other city's under attack. So now he's still not going to make it to warn him. And he makes it to the king, and the king is like, "Well, there ain't nothing we can do about that anyway." So that was like,
exactly.
Oh, well, you just should have kept going to Celebrimbor then, because he's making a lot of rings.
A lot of convenient stuff happening. A lot of convenient stuff happening that moves the plot forward. And that's something that we can acknowledge. Now, look, when we're dealing with this series like this, I think you're gonna have some of that. You know what I mean? Like, there's going to be some stuff that doesn't make sense and that a lot of normal, sane people would not have done in certain situations, but then it wouldn't move a plot forward, and that's why we get where we're at. And then we can always kind of go back to, it's the obsession with the rings and saving her people and vengeance on her brother and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of things that cloud her judgment where we could kind of say that, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. A lot of people would not have made the decisions that she is making, and it does seem conveniently to be moving the plot forward.
I did like, now a lot of people probably won't. I'm trying to anticipate what it is that's going to have everybody up in arms each given week. So
exactly.
we've got a couple guesses. Another one is, and I really like it. It's a storyline with Celebrimbor is becoming patently obvious that these rings are a problem, that they don't work, that maybe you're being manipulated, that these are, because the dwarf rings are obviously corrupted. I mean, by the end of it, he knows that, right? He knows that the dwarf rings are corrupted. He knows that they're not working correctly. And he's faced with, and I feel like this is interesting territory because people end up this way too. This happens in the real world. Now, people will be mad, I think, because they feel like elves should be better. They should be better than humans, and you shouldn't use elves to tell a human foible story. But really, in all of fiction, no matter if you're talking about elves or wizards or hobbits, the point of fiction is to tell stories about human foibles, because all these other things are made up. they're metaphors for us. So even an elf might have this, where what you really need to do right now, what Celebrimbor really needs to do, is own the fact that he's made a mistake. You went down the wrong road. You've wasted time and resources. You've been dishonest. You've created something that you can't control and that is corrupted, and you know exactly what the problem is, but you feel like the solution for the problem you created is more of the exact same thing, because if I keep trying, I'm going to get it right. I know I messed it up. But I just need to try it again, slightly different, and I'm going to fix the whole thing. And it's once you're feeling like it's not believable, but really, when you think about it, it totally is, because that's how people react.
Well, and what's really interesting, specifically with fantasy writers, is a lot of fantasy writers also happen to be very, very deep philosophers. And Tolkien was no different. Tolkien was a very, very deep philosopher. The human psyche is something that he absolutely worked into the concepts of his writing, and the struggles that men have with all kinds of things, not just good and evil, but, all of the different thoughts that come through humans' minds and how they progress and how they get from certain points. And you see this in all kinds of writing. You see this with J.K. Rowling. You see this with C.S. Lewis. You see this with David Eddings. You see this with Salvatore. You see this with all these fantasy writers, where they kind of work in a lot of this philosophy. And it's very, very deep, to see how their characters work and all the little things that they do and the decisions that they make that sometimes are contrary. And us as the audience, we can sit here and say, no, don't do that. That's, those rings are evil. Those rings are going to tear you apart. But that's the perspective that we have as the audience that they don't have in the story. And it just opens up all kinds of discussions that these authors really wanted to introduce. That's the whole purpose of why these authors were as deep as they were. And Tolkien was known to be a philosopher. So that's just one of those things. A guy that just constantly would ask questions and constantly would try to work those into his writings. And so that's something that that I think it's very good that we're starting to see that in the show, because Peter Jackson really pulled that very well in the movies. I think that he pulled how all the characters kind of were thinking and working. One of the things that I remember very specifically is Bilbo, and seeing how the ring had corrupted him over the years in the original trilogy. That's something that almost is where we're at right now with some of the characters that we're seeing. We're seeing it with Durin the Older, we're seeing it with Celebrimbor, we're seeing it with even Galadriel. So this is the kind of thing that you need to expect with Tolkien, because this is the kind of storyline that he really, really wanted to focus on in the original series that he wrote. So yeah, I really like when we start getting into the depths of philosophy and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Did the Did the gates or the doors at the beginning of the episode, did that tickle your member berries, Tim? Did you get, oh,
Of
I
course,
recognize that.
that's the one Elvish word I know. Okay, that's the one Elvish word I know because of that scene in Fellowship. So, so I just think that's really funny. As soon as he said, "Oh, it's a password," I'm just like, "It's Belloc." I know that because because I know it from Fellowship of the Ring. So. I thought that was hilarious that they introduced that. But yeah, I was kind of wondering to myself if they were going to be that, if they were going to have any kind of Easter eggs that were going to be that blatantly obvious, through in each episode. And sometimes there's some that are really obvious. Sometimes there's some that aren't. That one, they laid it on really thick. So I didn't anticipate they would do it like that. But yeah, it was kind of funny.
Yeah. And it like really, because even though the costuming, settings, and production design, I mean, it's all very much like Peter Jackson. I know that these are not directly connected. They're not supposed to be exactly the same continuity. I mean, they're all based on Tolkien, but like these are different adaptations. I think that's more of the legal thing, but the design of it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't close to the same.
And I mean, I'd have to go back and read it again. I mean, it might be very, very imaginatively described where there wasn't a lot of latitude there. I'll have to check.
Right.
But yeah, as far as it goes, it did look, you're right, exactly the same. But I would say, I mean, the thing that they're doing really well in this series that I think some people may like and may not like is that they are leaving this kind of open-ended enough to be if you want to, you can continue this into the universe that you're familiar with. You know what I mean? They're kind of leaving that open-ended enough. It's not like it's not like they're saying this is a total prequel to the Peter Jacksons, because it's obviously not with the rights, but everything is made to look kind of similar to Peter Jackson, with the exception of, a few of the characters and the things that they've changed. But, because we mentioned how the elves look different and a lot of that kind of stuff. But if I was to nail down one of the things that they've done really well, if they really want you to have in your mind that this can be a prequel to Peter Jackson's series without saying it, then that's kind of what they're trying to achieve, and then they're letting the people connect the dots themselves. I think that's kind of something that if they keep leaving it like that and keep putting some things in like they did with that door, I think that that's going to kind of ultimately serve its purpose for that. I think now what we need to get into is maybe some predictions and what we kind of see moving forward. I think that what I predict moving forward is something in the construction of the Rings for Men, which they have not done yet, correct?
They started, right? Yeah, they started, but they were doing it. They were making mistakes, and now Celebrimbor is going to help. So I think they're going to start over. Yeah.
So they're starting over with the Rings for Men, right? And the Rings for Men, when they get to the point where there's something in the construction of the Rings for Men that is going to throw the flag that Anatar is someone that they should not be helping. That's going to be my prediction, is that in the construction of those rings, we're going to have him kind of revealed as who he is, and it's going to be too late at that point. So we're going to have that, I believe, at some point. And then we're also going to have I think we're going to have a lot of tension there in the dwarf storyline. That's going to be coming up for sure, because we're going to have during the older and during the younger, we're going to have kind of some separation there based on whether or not they're going to trust the rings, and that's something that obviously is going to be a source of tension there. And then there were a couple storylines we didn't even see this week, right? We didn't see Isildur this week, and we didn't see the unnamed wizard, right? So we got to get caught up on them next week. So I'm expecting a lot of them in the next episode.
at some point we have to meet some more men because they said it expressly. We're going to find the wisest and best men from all of the kingdoms, and so far, all we have is Númenóreans. I know that Gondor does not exist yet because Isildur they're going to establish Gondor. So, and then we've had the men in the south, but they've been conquered already. So we've only seen two groups of men. We've seen the Númenóreans and we've seen the Southmen. So we're not going to give a ring to the Southmen. The Southmen are already conquered.
Yeah, we're going to have to see a lot more men. I agree. And once again, right now, Isildur is still kind of, just trying to find his way around.
Right.
So,
and I'm sure there's canonical explanations of which kingdoms the 9 ring wraiths came from. You know what I'm saying? And whether or not we're going to stay true to that. Again,
I've always wondered about
they just can't pick 9 Númenóreans. You know what I'm saying? And those are the only men we've got.
Yeah, that wouldn't make a lot of sense at all. That wouldn't make a lot of sense at all. I've wondered that. I've wondered that myself, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense that we haven't kind of been introduced to more of the leaders for that yet, especially. But I know that they're planning on doing 3 more seasons after this, so there's plenty of time, I suppose. But yeah.
How much time do we have for Celebrimbor? He's not really deceived anymore. I feel like by the end of this episode, Celebrimbor knows that he's being manipulated. He knows that this guy he's working with is not who he says he is, but he feels like he can overcome it by his skills, by doing this better. But he's very suspicious. So how long can we stretch this out? Like, I feel like they need to make these 9 rings and pass them out fairly quickly. Otherwise, these suspicions are going to they're going to overcome fairly quickly. Well, you know what I'm saying?
Because he's not going to be the only one that's suspicious at some point. So it doesn't really make sense. He's got all these people helping him, so at some point, is somebody going to be like, hey, why are we doing everything this guy says? Like at some point, somebody's got to think to themselves. So I'm wondering how long it's going to be before something like that happens, where somebody there questions Anatar, and Anatar retaliates somehow. And then what do we do? You know what I mean?
Elrod has made it all the way back to Linden, and he's still kick rocks. There's nothing we can do to save them. So is he just going to hang out in Linden, or is he going to get back on the road?
Yeah. And bury your people because the orcs are coming. That's basically all he said.
I feel like the time frame should be compressed, that we got to find these 9 guys, get to know them at least. Maybe we'll just have a scene where there's 9 dudes standing in the forge and they're like, here are your rings.
What's really interesting is that I think that the idea of the series was to kind of show how each set of rings was introduced, how each set of rings corrupted its people, pointing towards that one ring of power. I think that's kind of what they're trying to do. So how are we going to fill more time if we're this close? We're already starting making the rings for men. We haven't introduced them yet. That can't take too long. And we can't have way too many storylines. So we can't have way too many storylines because we already have, I think, too many storylines. So they're going to introduce these guys. It'll be introduced very quickly. And then what do you do? Once everybody's got their rings, what do you do? That's kind of going to be the question. So, but it appears that we're going to get some kind of a battle scene. We had a whole army of orcs that was getting ready to storm at the end of the episode. So that's going to be cool. Yeah. Everybody loves a battle scene, right?
Right.
And then we see that we've got, like I said, a lot of political tension and a lot of other things going on. And then some storylines that we need to get back to that we didn't see this week. So that's what I think is probably going to happen. But yeah, through the end of this season, I would be shocked if they found the 9 leaders of men. I would be shocked because what are you going to do for the other 3 seasons if you do that? So
I mean, it's competing things. So you have to take your time, finding the men, but also they may have started planting these seeds of doubt in Celebrimbor a little early, because you know what I'm saying. I feel like this should be.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like this should be falling apart any minute now.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I feel like he should figure this out
Once
any
again,
minute.
I think that's you asked earlier what's going to be driving people crazy. I think that's what's going to be driving people crazy is the fact that Celebrimbor was so deceived. Okay. And when it became clear that he was deceived, he still pressed forward. Okay.
Yeah.
But once again, we're looking at this as the audience and not as the characters being corrupted by these rings, being corrupted by Anatar, all that stuff, which is completely different. So,
Right.
so the thing that's going to drive people crazy this episode, I think that's probably going to be the thing.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not ruining it for me yet. Again, the speculation is worse than the reality. I'm just looking at it and thinking like, okay, we're approaching structural problems, but maybe they will have an ingenious way to make it work. I mean, I am enjoying the moral grayness that Celebrimbor is in now. The quagmire he's put himself in. He's kind of stuck there. So maybe we'll just roll around in that moral ambiguity with him for a while. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I think that, one of the things about anybody who's ever read a fantasy epic series, you just got to realize that, the story hops around. It's never really focused on getting to A to B with any particular set of characters very quickly. Never. They're almost always very, very, very compacted and compartmentalized in a way that you have the story with this set of characters, and then you have the story with this set of characters and this set of characters. And then eventually they all kind of, there's something kind of weaves where they all end up kind of conveniently meeting together. But we don't really need that yet, I don't think, in this series. I think what we need in this series is we need more of the character building first, and then when they start to bring the characters together, probably in the middle of next season is probably what we're looking at for a lot of that. So yeah, it'll be very interesting. But I am still enjoying the series. Okay, I'll openly admit I'm still enjoying the series, even the episodes that tend to be a little on the slower side. I am not going to join the haters just yet. I think that it's doing just fine.
Yeah, no, me neither. I'm still enjoying it. I still like this episode. I did feel like we were going to have the pacing pick up, and then it didn't, but
yeah,
I feel like I think we're going to get a big battle next episode. So, you got to wait one more additional episode. That's good enough. Again, we've never said it's the greatest creation in all of fiction, but it is good. It is on the upside of good. It's good.
If you're somebody who read the books, and if you're somebody who really enjoys fantasy, this is something that you will enjoy. All right. Now, if you're somebody that is going to get all twisted over the most minuscule details, then yes, this is something that is probably not for you. I typically get twisted up about details. Ask Dan, he's known me for a long time. Okay. I typically get twisted up about details. The reason I'm not getting twisted up about these details is because, quite frankly, a lot of these details are not the things that really have completely and totally destroyed the universe yet. There's still time. Okay. I mentioned this the first episode. When I watched Secret Invasion, the first 2 episodes, I was like, oh, this might be pretty good. And then by the end, I was just like everybody else on the internet, I was like, what did they do to the universe that I know and love? And so there's still time for them to screw it up, guys. Okay. And when it does, we'll openly admit that it happened. But so far, they have not done that yet.
Well, we were there with Bonebridger live every week, reacting to the Acolyte. And the Acolyte is the worst thing in media in all of media history. I'm just going to let you know. But
it's bad. It's bad.
We really, I was trying to think back to it. And most people had watching the previews. And we were warned that episode 3 was going to be awful and destroy everything. And I remember after episode 3, still being of the mind telling people that you're overreacting and it's really not that bad, because I remember episode 3 wasn't great, but it didn't kill anything for me. It wasn't until like episode 4. It wasn't until they were the episode where they're walking through the woods, and all of a sudden everybody in the show started changing sides every 30 seconds. And that's when I was like, oh, this is just stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought they were building to something, and no, they were
woods they were walking through, Dan.
What's that?
It wasn't woods they were walking through, Dan. It was an obvious soundstage that they were walking through.
Yeah, they were walking through a soundstage with plastic plants and big bright lights.
Plastic plants and CGI trees that don't fall in natural gravity directions. There's a lot of things that are bad. Okay. The complaints I hear about this show a lot, and there are two. Okay. The first is special effects, which honestly, if you think the special effects are bad on this show, you have not paid attention to other shows. Take a look at the first season of Game of Thrones. Okay. Take a look at the Acolyte, which we just mentioned. Take a look at Obi-Wan Kenobi. Take a look at special effects on a lot of other things. She-Hulk. You want to see bad CGI? It's out there. This isn't bad CGI. Now, CGI does have some things that are going to be weaknesses. It's just inherent in the medium. But that doesn't mean that this is poorly done. This is better CGI in my mind than what Peter Jackson did in the first Hobbit movie. Okay, so I really don't understand why the CGI is something that people are getting uptight about. The second thing I hear a lot is something that I heard on one of the major YouTubes this week, and I've heard it reiterated by a lot of people, and that is that there is a lot of repurposed dialogue. Okay, and what they mean by that is almost verbatim things that you hear in the original Lord of the Rings trilogy by Peter Jackson. Okay. What I would say to that is when you're dealing with the same universe, you're going to hear a lot of the same things. Why do you think it is that you hear in all the Star Wars movies, may the Force be with you? I feel a disturbance in the Force. I have a bad feeling about this. There's all kinds of things that you hear over and over again, right? That doesn't mean that's repurposed dialogue. That just means that in that universe, that's a concept that carries over from generation to generation. And that's something that is a little different than just cutting and pasting because you're out of ideas. That's not what they're doing here. Okay. So that's my response to that. And I would just say that, I think that the dialogue is very Tolkienian. It's been written very well. It was not like the Acolyte was written by somebody that was 12 years old. It was terrible. Okay. So it's completely and totally different from that. That's bad dialogue. This is dialogue that you might not like, but it fits the character. It fits the genre. It fits the universe. And, all the stuff that they're talking about really carries over from generation to generation. So that's just something that I would like to say in response to some of the things that I had heard.
I feel like repurposed dialogue is not a problem as long as the dialogue fits within the structure of the scene and the scene fits within the structure of that story. You don't want to have to drive your story to a spot to have this scene so the person could say this thing.
And you would have thought by watching this major YouTuber's response, and everybody knows the one I'm talking about, but I'm not going to name him. But you would have thought by watching this remix that everybody that was watching Rings of Power this week was like the Leo DiCaprio meme. They were like, "Oh, he said the thing," and that's not at all the case. Okay, 99% of people didn't notice it until he brought it up. I'll guarantee you. Okay, and the reason is because once again, these are things that fit the characters pretty naturally.
There's the writing and the structure of it. So if obviously the story is being driven in some odd direction, so that just so somebody can deliver a line, you start to pick up on that. The other thing is in the acting is if you give somebody repurposed dialogue and they deliver the reading exactly the same way and kind of give that mug at the camera, like, "Hey, I just said the thing,"
What you talking about, Willis, right? I mean,
yeah. Right. But nobody did that. Nobody was stopping and mugging the camera to say, "Look, did you hear me say the thing? I said the thing." That didn't happen.
That's right.
So
if the guy that we think is Gandalf says, "Fly, you fools," I will be on board. Okay, but until then, I think we're good. Okay, I'll be on board with the repurposed dialogue argument if that takes place. But until then, I think we're all right.
Yeah. Until next week, when we come to ruin your world again, I think we've wrapped up our thoughts on episode 5 of Rings of Power.
Watch our videos.
Yeah. And subscribe.
And the notification bell. Do that too.
Yeah, all that stuff, man.